Good evening, everyone. It's 6 p.m., February 28th, Wednesday. This is the Board of Commissioners workshop. City Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Rosteck,
Present.
Vice Mayor Kerr,
Here.
Commissioner Taglerini,
Here.
Commissioner McGinn,
Here.
Commissioner Brooks. Here. All are present.
All right, thank you kindly. Public comment for any items that are not on the agenda, please come up. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everybody. John Conley, Madera Beach. I'm here trying to see if we could solve a use access road over here at the Bicentennial Park on the other side of the bridge. I have a kayak and I see a lot of people that have kayaks. And you have telephone poles all along that, and you have an incline going down to the water like that. It's fine to unload your kayak and go downhill, but when you come back up the hill, and then you have this telephone pole trying to put it in the back of your car, truck, whatever, there is the access road there that you're not supposed to use, so on and so forth. What I'm trying to get would be a use where you could go down to the beach with a sign, put up a sign, load, unload, and no parking, and then go back out into the parking lot. And I just asked Jay, and Jay said it is the county's park, but we maintain it. So I'm trying to see if we could do something where people would have a little bit more access and it would be a little bit more friendly for a person like myself with a kayak. Thank you.
All right, thank you. City Manager, could we get this added to a future agenda?
Certainly, yes.
Okay. Is there any other public comment on items that are not on the agenda? Please come up. We'd love to hear from you. All right, next up is BOC rules and responsibilities. I think this was brought up by Commissioner Brooks.
So I did bring it up because I just wanted some clarification on our roles and duty as Commissioner, Mayor, Vice Mayor. I believe the city manager is going to start some discussion on that.
You included in the agenda packet are straight from the city's charter what the roles and responsibilities are for the Board of Commissioners, what your powers when you take oath, the role of the mayor, the vice mayor, commissioners, what happens if vacancies, et cetera, rules of procedure, how many are necessary to have a quorum to hold a meeting, transact business, et cetera. In your role as the legislative body or elected officers, and we've had discussions certainly when all of you came into office regarding what the charter stipulates and what your role is, what the role of administration, the role of the city manager, attorney, et cetera, the charter officers, this is more geared, you'll encounter interactions with either members of the public, businesses, visitors, et cetera. And as I've shared with all of you, there is a role that if there's anything that you believe that obviously that I should do as city manager, there's an opportunity obviously to do that. What we want to ensure is that there isn't a perception or a belief that there may be something that one of you may be doing as difficult to your role as a commissioner, which is difficult to separate from just a resident here, and obviously, and that goes in any city. But that's really kind of a reminder we wanted, and if there were any questions or to have a discussion, how to handle that. When there are issues that do come up, or some of you have brought up, obviously I always am reminding you, let me know of anything needing attention. And you do provide that I will then, through staff, handle that and look for resolutions, obviously. Occasionally, those resolutions involve other agencies at other levels of government, county, state, federal, and sometimes those can take a long time. But we have had some issues that have kind of continued over certainly the time that I've been here, but I want to make sure that you're all aware that going forward, there will be my role to kind of, intercede wherever is possible and to try to handle the situation, to do the follow-up that needs to be done, whether it's with the county, with the state, or with any federal or other agency. I think there have been some questions, some comments related to anything that may have come before you, whether from a resident, a business, or a visitor, or even just, well, that pretty much covers just about everyone. But regardless, that's the role that I should be following up on, is to provide that, so that there isn't the opportunity or the perception that something that you may or may not have done as a result of your role being an elected, a member of the Board of Commissioners. So that's kind of to reiterate that. There have been a few instances where that has occurred, and it's my role to make sure and to sort of be kind of a, not necessarily a mediator or moderator, but something to make sure that there is whatever resolution can come about, that happens. And I will follow that up, whatever that situation may be. Some of them come before a meeting here, not all of them do, and they can really cover any topic or anything that we do within our city, anything from a marina issue to parking to recreation, whatever the case may be. So just remembering that, your roles is adopt the ordinances, resolutions. The mayor has a little bit more overseeing these meetings, the official signer of different activities that, the ordinances, resolutions, contracts, agreements, et cetera. And then certainly the role of administration and the role that I take in overseeing the day-to-day operations. So I don't know if, Commissioner, you wanted to kind of go over anything beyond that, but really that's kind of the purpose of this is really, and I think to reiterate anybody that will watch or is here, that there are specific roles that the elected officials perform, and then obviously what administration does. Certainly at any time, anybody can go directly to any of the five of you with any issue, concern. Accolades are welcomed as well. But really with anything, and then it flows back through the manager, through the attorney, the clerk, or finance as the charter officers in our charter. So it really just kind of, if you have any questions or anything related to that, I think all of you are very clear on the roles and the responsibilities. You do have a policy manual. The clerk typically reminds me, hey, the Board of Commissioners has a policy manual that is reviewed every year shortly after the election. It's in our charter, or I believe it's in our charter, that it's to be reviewed within 60 or 90 days following the election.
Yeah, 90 days.
90 days. And we will, again, schedule to do that probably at the April workshop to review that manual. And certainly the purpose of that is to make sure that the processes that you perform, and it is pretty extensive and it's in the packet, at that time, at that meeting, if we need to make any changes to that manual, that we discuss that and then proceed to make any changes that you would like. But really just kind of to just remind everybody of that, and if you have any questions or anything else, let me know. But as I did had in one-on-ones, and not just recently, but over the time period, there are, again, I will follow up on items that really need more follow-up, again, with external, particularly external agencies. So whatever that might be, it seems that some of them have kind of lingered or languished and without much follow-up. But if there's any issue, then I will be the one to follow up, or certainly direct somebody in our staff to follow up with any external agency or body or whomever that might be. So be happy to answer any questions you may have, or any other comments or anything related to that. I think there have been, in the 2 years that I've been here, we do have a very active, I guess, citizenry, you could call it, and there is a lot of very, very positive history in the city, and some history that every city has quirks and different things that tend to happen, and with different personalities. But I truly believe that we have a very good commission, and what we're doing now going forward, it's, again, any issues that do come up, there's still, and I believe there will always be the perception among certain residents or within any city that elected officials tend to put that over being a resident. And it is very difficult to separate those two, but that's where, myself, the city attorney, can come in and provide any clarification or certainly any follow-up to avoid even the mere appearance of somebody stating, oh, well, they were using their name, their position, their office to do something that, again, we would not want that to come out. None of that has happened. I'm simply stating that's available. I mean, should we ever get to that point of, again, the city manager stepping in and following up so that it doesn't come back to any one of you that you may have followed up where in reality it not something that needed to happen.
So I was just looking for that clarification from our last meeting when the resident stood and spoke and the way the conversation started going, just to make sure that we're all mindful that we are elected officials and we're here to serve the community as a whole and not to target any individual or business.
Is there any
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
commissioners, anything else from the commissioners? Any public comment on this? Please come up. We'd love to hear what you have to say. All right. Next item up then is Building Department Code Enforcement Satellite Office. Frank?
And Mayor and Commission, a reminder, this, and Frank will explain, we have a budgeted, or sort of mini capital project, I'll call it, for an expansion of our code enforcement sort of building area, and that's in our current year budget. I'll turn it over to Mr. DeSantis.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm standing in front of you, asking for your permission to move forward with this satellite, code enforcement satellite office that we want to build out downstairs. We went out for bid back in November, as you can see from the memo, and we got a number back in December of $220,000 as the lowest bid of the three. We originally had it proposed at $150,000, but that was well over 2 years ago. And as you can see what happened in the past 2 years, how inflated. So I'm asking for your permission to move forward with this. Any questions?
Commissioners?
I don't have any questions.
Frank, just if you could up the time frame on this?
I talked to the construction company, and they could start it immediately, and they could have it done within 3 months. And the additional $40,000 that's noted in there is the city's direct purchase of the necessities, the furniture, the IT stuff. If we do direct purchase, we can save even more money on that. That's what that's for.
Okay. And this, City Manager, would you explain what account this is coming out of? Because I don't think everyone understands. It's not coming out of the general fund.
Right, yeah, it's not a general
Yes.
fund project. This is coming out of our building fund, which has had a, Andrew would know best, I'm trying to remember, it has had a fund balance that is approaching a level where we had to take some action, which would, that action, if we did not utilize or lower the fund balance, that we would have to, or lower it by virtue of either lowering building fees or utilizing for existing operations or capital projects. So this is utilizing how we budgeted for it out of the building, how we budgeted for this project out of the building fund, that again is not using any tax dollars or any other fees other than those who are obtaining a building permit to build or renovate a structure or structures, and will allow for just greater flexibility and ease in our code enforcement and building operations.
Is there any public comment on this? Okay.
I mean,
We have a
the issue
consensus
was,
to
the
move-
issue was discussed
Yes.
for
Yep, we've-
the last couple of years, so
It's just a little more money now.
it is what it is.
It is.
My consensus, I think everyone is to move forward.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners.
Thank you. You have a good night. All right, next up is community development. We have the City of Madera Beach Master Plan presented by Kimley
Horn, yeah.
Horn.
And we have Ms. Rowan, our Community Development Director, to
Yeah.
introduce.
Thank you. So if y'all remember, we did post an RFQ, is RFQ 23-12, to create a new city master plan. We received 3 submittals, and then we also had a city review team review all of those submittals, and Kimley Horn scored the top. So we asked Kimley Horn to come to the BOC workshop tonight and do a presentation over the master plan. So I'll turn it over.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here tonight. My name's Hannah Schaefer. I'm an urban planner at Kimley Horn, and I'll be the project manager for this project. I'm also joined tonight by Nicole Galasso, who will be our deputy project manager, and Jared Schneider, who will serve as our senior advisor. So we could go to the next slide, please. So see our smiling faces there. Yeah, and we can stop at this slide. So of course, we know this project is going to entail just, the 3 of us, which will be the core team. So we have a team that has done a lot of projects in Pinellas County, specifically with beach communities as well. So we've all worked closely together on a number of plans in the area. We'll go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we've done a lot of different projects ranging from a lot of different planning topics, from transportation to land development codes, comprehensive plan updates, resiliency and vulnerability assessments, grant writing, and historic and heritage preservation. And now we'll get a little bit more into specifically the master plan project. So when we looked at the RFQ, we developed an approach. So this is what you're seeing tonight. We're still in the process of developing a scope of work. So we'll be coordinating further with the city staff on that. So as a draft for our schedule, we really anticipate this project taking about 12 months, with the bulk of work happening between the 3 to 10 month time frame, and we have the staff ability. We've worked on similar projects like this in the past, so we feel really comfortable about providing a on-schedule deliverable for you. We'll go to the next slide. And this is our project approach, and like I said, we're going to be refining this further, so we welcome any comments or questions from you all tonight that can help us refine that before we present the city with a draft scope. So it really will be broken down into 4 phases. The first phase will be a discovery phase where we're collecting data, looking at existing conditions, and looking at any existing plans or previous planning efforts that could impact the new city master plan. So really understanding where the city is at now to measure where it can be in the future. And then the next phase will be the community engagement phase and visioning phase. So this is where we'll spend a lot of time with a lot of different engagement efforts to understand what community members, stakeholders, what city leaders would like to see in the community, really trying to understand, where do you see Madeira Beach in 10, 20, 30 years from now? So that's what we're really trying to capture, is that overall vision, and then specific goals that we can plan to. And then the next phase, the establishing the master plan phase, this is where we'll take that vision and those goals and apply planning principles to them and different planning elements, strategies, and recommendations. And we know as we move through this plan, there might be a lot of different topics and themes that come up, but right now we kind of anticipate these key themes here: land use, parks and open space, zoning, multimodal transportation, sustainability and resiliency, heritage and historic preservation, and economic development. In the last phase will be the plan implementation phase, so this will be another key part of this. We'll take those recommendations and apply a time frame to them and also funding strategies. You know, we could have the greatest plan in the world, but if we don't have a way to fund it or implement it, it's just going to sit on a shelf, which is exactly what we don't want to do. We want to create a plan that's actionable and implementable. Next slide, please. If we could zoom out a little bit. So we did take these tasks that you saw in the schedule and we broke them down into the amount of hours and budget we'll be allocating for this project. And of course, nothing is set in stone. So if you feel that we should be allocating more time or prioritizing a task more than what we are here, you know, please let us know. But we really felt that the bulk of the work will be spent on the community engagement phase and then the plan development and implementation phases. We can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, we're still developing the scope of work and we'll be coordinating further with city staff on that. And once we have a final draft, we can sign a contract and then we'll proceed with a project kickoff meeting shortly after that. And that's all I have for you tonight. So if you have any questions or comments, we're here to listen.
So can you give me just a little bit of detail about the community engagement section? What does that look like? Is it city meetings? Is it just board of commissioner meetings? What does that look
Sure.
like?
Yeah, so that's something we always like to work with, you know, the city on, you know, what things have worked in the past, what hasn't worked in the past. You know, we're really anticipating a wide range of activities. So of course, we could do a more traditional workshop, open house style. We could do charrettes if that's preferred. And we are anticipating some smaller stakeholder engagement. So engaging smaller groups like business communities, school, youth organizations, different organizations in the city. So a wide range to capture everyone's voice, not just the people who typically come out to a public workshop.
But there would be opportunity for just residents that
Yes, yes. It will be focused mostly on resident feedback.
aren't. Thanks.
I have a question. This is for the, what's the difference between the master plan and the comprehensive plan? Maybe, I don't know if that's a question for you, but we have the master plan and we have the comprehensive plan. Which is the Duwani plan?
That's the master plan.
That's the master
like your vision, your overall,
So that's
you're
what-
looking at 30,000 feet down.
Okay. So I would imagine you already have a copy of the Duwani plan?
Yes, we do.
Okay. At the end of this, I would imagine the deliverables would be similar to what the Duwani plan looked like?
Yeah, it certainly can. We want to provide a plan that works best for the city. So if that is what works for the city, we can provide something very similar. But we do want to work with city staff to make sure we are focusing on the things that are most important. And I know there's a lot in that plan, and I've glanced over it, but we can provide as much detail in that if you would like, or we can specify certain things.
Will that deliverable, one thing that's kind of lacking in the Duwani plan is kind of like a timeline. We expect these items to be updated in 5 years, these to be in 10. Is it too early to talk about how the deliverables are going to look? And
No, I mean, we always do that in all of our plans. We want to provide something that is feasible and implementable. So almost all of our plans, we do have, you know, things that can be done, you know, a quick win or short-term, mid-term, long-term, because we do understand, you know, some things are going to take longer depending on funding or just design, construction, but there are smaller things that can be done almost right away or in the short term, so we do anticipate that being part of the project.
Okay. I think early on when the RFQ went out, two of the things that I wanted to make sure that were listed was in that deliverable to, you know, to provide an understanding to the residents, not only on the history of Madeira Beach, but the local economy and how that works and the give and take with tourism and business and how it balances with services for the residents, and I want to make sure that that's part of it, the synergy between tourism and residents, because sometimes it feels like there's not really a synergy there, that, you know, the residents are sacrificing for tourism, but we need to, in my opinion, I think that needs to be addressed in the plan. And of course, you know, what do we want the city to look like, you know, in 20 years, a guideline for that. But resiliency, you know, as far as, you know, flooding, we have those kind of issues, and I would imagine you're going to address those types of issues. You're nodding, so
Yes,
that's an
yes.
assumption. Okay. And then what's most appealing, as far as what I understand, is Kimley Horn's ability to help us with the grants
Yes.
to make this happen.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you go about that? I mean, do you have a special department that's focused on
Yeah, we
that?
do. I can't give, you know, the full details, but if you want to go back to the slide with I think there's 7 faces on it. Joe Crozier is our grant expert. Yeah, there he is on the bottom right. He's actually in our St. Petersburg office, so he is local, but he provides services to all of our offices throughout the country. So we have our in-house grant expert right here in the area. So he's plugged into, you know, not only state, but also federal grant opportunities. And generally what he provides is a grants matrix to you all that will have any type of grant that could be applied for anything we might recommend in this project. Some stuff might be really specific, but it will entail, you know, when those deadlines are, what kind of match might need to be provided on the city's end, or maybe there is no match required, and it'll be more detailed, and, you know, the amount of funding available as well. And then we can also look at, you know, outside of grant funding, we can also look at tools and strategies to, you know, work with the city's budget or other opportunities locally in the area for grants.
Perfect. One last question. Are grants available for the actual master plan for the 150,000? Do you know that, or would you be going down that road, or is that something that we should talk to the city manager about?
I think we can look into that. Yeah, I think Kinley Horn can provide a lot more information, data, support, applications for the projects that will be carried out over the next 5, 10, 15 years. Really your bigger dollar expenditures, but we have other sources to see what type. But occasionally there are for these types of engagements, but we'll look into that as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
All set? All right,
All
thank
right,
you
I
all.
think
Looking
you're
forward to
good.
working with you.
We're excited. Thank you.
I guess next up is John's Pass Village Activity Center Plan and Zoning.
All right. And this slideshow will look very similar to what you've seen before. And just feel free to stop me. So why the activity center? Well, these are the main reasons. To protect the village, the unique character of Johns Pass Village, to assure that we have compatible redevelopment with any new development in this area. We must be consistent with the countywide plan. And then this is really a proactive instead of reactive approach in planning. So if you remember, there's 3 major plans that we look at when we're looking at local land regulations. We have the county with the countywide plan, and then we have locally our comprehensive plan, and then our code of ordinances. So the county is very overarching of the intensities, densities, what use you can have on your land. And then our comprehensive plan looks very similar to that. And then in the zoning, in the land development regulations, that's more of the setbacks, the height, landscaping requirements, all of those more nitty-gritty of planning. And all three of these plans have to kind of talk to each other. We cannot exceed any standards higher than the countywide plan. So here are the three maps. So each parcel of land has three different land use, or three different categories on it. You have the land use with the countywide plan, the future land use with the comprehensive plan, and then your zoning districts. So going back in time, back in 2007 and 2008, the city adopted regulations that were higher than what the county allowed. So we'll be going through three different standards. We corrected this everywhere else in Madeira Beach. If you remember a few months ago, we lowered standards on the east and west side of Gulf Boulevard. So I'll be referring back to the old standards, so what it was before we corrected that, what the standards are now, and then the proposed standards in the activity center. So the previous densities and intensities, the ones that were not compliant with the countywide plan, you can see where we exceeded the countywide plans, intensities and densities here. And then we corrected that a few months ago with a lot of different ordinances, changing up the zoning districts, reducing all of those intensities and densities to match the countywide plan. And then we also adopted that alternative temporary lodging use standard, where a property owner would have to apply for a development agreement to get higher standards. And that was really to account for the previous standards that we had. So this is what the standards are right now. And then you can see on the left side, the countywide plan, their standards, and in some of these, we adopted standards that are lower than the county allows for, but nothing higher. So when we were going through this process, when we found out these inconsistencies, there really was a concentration of non-conforming properties, so properties that did not meet those standards of the county, that exceeded those standards. So that's why in this area, in Johns Pass Village, we're going for that land use change. And that activity center designation really covers everything that is on the ground right now. So you can see in this slide, in the white boxes, we have the previous, so not what it is currently, but the previous standards that were adopted back in 07, 08, and then the proposed standards with the activity center. And then Andrew put together these lovely maps. So we have on the left side, the existing density that takes into account residential and temporary lodging use standards. And then on the right side, we have the existing intensity.
And basically, anything in the darker blues on the left are over 50 units per acre, and anything from like the orange down to the red is an FAR higher than a 0.55.
I think it's that lighter
Yeah.
orange right
So,
there.
so as you can see, the floor area, it's treated as like air-conditioned space. So as you can see, the FARs are very high down there, and then the density, especially on the beach side and up near Madeira Bay, is relatively high also. So the neighborhood center, activity center category kind of encompasses both and brings them into compliance.
So here's the whole area of the activity center. But as we discussed before, it's broken down into 6 character districts, which are really captured in the special area plan, as well as it will be captured in the zoning. All of these will be different zoning districts. So on the countywide plan map, it's changed to this activity center of a neighborhood center subcategory. And then next BOC meeting, you'll be voting on the future land use map. This is in the comprehensive plan. So on the map, it would look like this. It would just be one area as activity center. But in the special area plan, that 70-page document, that's like attached to the comprehensive plan. It really talks about each of those 6 character districts, the intensities and densities that are listed within there. And then in the future, we will have the zoning map, which will look similar to this. And I think this is important to bring up. I know we brought it up before, but in the zoning, it's in the land use and zoning that there's a lot of inconsistencies. The land use has the intensity, that's the floor area ratio of that 0.55, and that's also at the county's level. So that's the ratio between the land area, and the easiest way to imagine it is the air-conditioned area. So about half of the land could be built on a 1-story building. Well, that's not what is down at Johns Pass Village, as we know. And then looking at our zoning also does not reflect the character of what is built down there. So here, this is taken from our zoning, and we just did a quick sketch up of what that looks like with the setbacks. And that does not match the character of Johns Pass Village. So that will be fixed in the zoning. It'll be fixed in the land use, the comprehensive plan, and then after it'll be fixed in the zoning. And here is the proposed intensities and densities again. And anywhere with the asterisks is that alternative temporary lodging use standard. And those are the standards that a property owner can apply for to get those higher standards. And they would have to have a development agreement that would go to Planning Commission as well as BOC. And the next slide, talking about those alternative standards. Another thing that's very unusual that's in the countywide plan, the county states that the structured parking is counted in the floor area ratio. Now, what I stated before, the floor area ratio is the ratio between the lot and then imagine the air-conditioned area. So it's not typical to count that parking area. So that's a big thing when we're looking forward to the floor area ratio with those alternative temporary lodging use standards, is that you have to account for that structured parking. And we know anything in the past will require parking, and you would imagine a larger hotel would require more parking, as well as a lot of developers would want an excess of parking, since parking is very much needed down in the pass. As well as the development agreements, just the local requirements, 1 planning commission meeting, 1 BOC meeting. There is a mailed notice of 300 feet of the property. It's advertised in the newspaper and then also posted on the property. And using this alternative standard, the development agreement at a minimum must meet all of these things. So they must provide concurrency analysis, hurricane evacuation plans. So anytime that the county calls for hurricane watch, the hotel would have to be evacuated. mobility management, and then design considerations, operating characteristics and restrictions. So it's not just an easy contract. There's a lot of hoops that this development agreement would have to go through, and this is just at a minimum. So the BOC could also ask for additional things on top of these requirements, which is not typical of most developments. And then there's other local requirements. So I imagine if someone is asking for these alternative standards, be a bigger building. So therefore, in our site plan section in our code, anything over 2,001 square feet would be considered a major site plan, and then that would require a neighborhood meeting, and then it would also have to go to Planning Commission for review. And then, of course, we have our local regulations, which are in the zoning code, so setback, height, floodplain requirements, landscaping, drainage, all of those things. So where we are in this whole process, I know it's been a long process. Last week, we had the countywide plan establish the activity center. There was a public meeting at the county level that was voted on 6-1 to approve the activity center. So now it goes back to BOC at your next meeting on the 13th. And then after that, we will be amending the land development code to establish those zoning districts. And then we also included this, might just be good to flip back and forth or whenever we're discussing, but this has all of, at the end of the packet, it says all the previous, the current standards, and the proposed standards. So the previous was the standards that were adopted in 07, 08, or before that. The current standards are the standards when we reduced things to be compliant with the county. And the proposed standards are the standards that are proposed in the activity center designation.
And as you can see in the Boardwalk District, we've removed any potential to gain any temporary lodging density from that property in the Boardwalk District. While previously and currently there is potential to get temporary lodging density off of the boardwalk. So the Johns Pass Village Activity Center plan would fix that and remove that. In the commercial core, previously it was 60 by right, now it was 40 by right, and or 60 with a development agreement with the alternative temporary lodging standards, and the proposed is 60 temporary lodging units by right, like how it was previously, and then depending on lot area, less than an acre, 75 units per acre, and more than an acre, up to 100 with a development agreement. In the Johns Pass Resort, previously it was up to 75 temporary lodging units per acre and a 2 FAR depending on amount of lot area. And then current, we reduced it, but the proposed would do 60 by right, which is lower than the previous 75, and then 75 to 100 with a development agreement, and less than an acre 75 and more than an acre 100. And it's important to remember there are condo and other buildings down there that are pushing like 60, 70 units per acre. Some of the older condo buildings down there. So there are existing buildings, usually about 6 stories, that are about that size currently. The low intensity mixed use, previously, this area is kind of where it was rezoned in the early 2000s to R3. but the future land use wasn't corrected.
So I don't know exactly what year they did this, but they rezoned this area, Pelican Lane, to R3, and R3 is what's on the west side of Gulf Boulevard. So everything on the beach is that R3. So it's rezoned R3. They should have also done a land use change. No one ever did. So those don't match each other. This corrects that. So that's why you have a lot of different zoning and comp plan. They didn't match each other. So now it will.
And as you can see, the temporary lodging units per acre by right, if in the proposed, is reduced from the 45 to 75 to 40, and 60 would be allowed with the alternative temporary lodging use standards, which is less than the by right that was 75 previously. And that area is like very tiny area, so it's not, I think it's like a little more than an acre. It's it's mostly built out. There's only a couple like little vacant lots down there. So the traditional village, it was previously like had the 60 temporary lodging units per acre by right, and then we're reducing that to 45. The reason why we're doing this is we want to make sure to protect the commercial uses within the village and keep that area primarily commercial, like the nice kind of Main Street feel it has currently.
And in the zoning, we're looking to write in, and I think it's written like this in the C1 zoning, that temporary lodging or residential can only be above commercial. So we will be keeping that. So the ground floor will have to be commercial, so you don't have any dead space.
And then the transitional was up to 75 temporary lodging units per acre previously, and the proposed, we're reducing that to 50 by right, and then 75 with a development agreement. So as you can see, in some areas we reduced temporary lodging density or completely removed it, and in some areas it went up slightly with a development agreement, but as you can see, we're adopting much stricter language, which makes it much harder and requires a lot more work for the developer to apply for, because it's important to make sure that any new redevelopment benefits the community and mitigates its impact. So we wanted to make sure that language was in there to make sure the city is able to have control over that.
Commissioners, any questions?
So in my current continuing endeavor to understand this, every detail of this, so I can answer with authority to residents, we go back and it seems like we use two different kinds of measurements: floor area ratio and units per acre. Can you give me I don't know if there's a simple contrasting or definition, and why do we use one for some things and why do we use one for other things? Floor area ratio versus units per acre.
So everything in the activity center, you'll use both unless if it's commercial. So commercial doesn't have any residents. It also doesn't have any temporary lodging. So commercial's only looking at the floor area ratio. And that's...
So why do we use two different ones? Why?
So then say if you're building a condo or you want to do a triplex, you're going to be looking at that residential units per acre. So you take your lot size, the acreage of your lot size, and then multiply it by that units per acre. And so then if you're building a hotel or doing temporary lodging, not vacation rental, but temporary lodging, where you have a hotel management company, that's when you use the temporary lodging units per acre. Okay. So you're going to use that temporary lodging units per acre as well as the floor area ratio. So you're going to have those two standards that you have to, as well as the
Units per acre is going to
residential.
be more for temporary, and floor area ratio is going to be, sorry, units per acre is more for permanent, or
It's-
condos, or,
We use it for residential, and then we also use it for temporary lodging. So if you look at this slide that's up, you have the res UPA, so that's residential. So if you're building a triplex, you want to build a little condo or townhomes, we're looking at those standards. So we take the area of your lot, the acreage of your lot, and multiply it by that. Or if you say, hey, I want to build a hotel, we'll look at the temporary lodging units per acre, and then we'll multiply it by your lot. But in both the residential and temporary lodging, you also are using the floor area ratio. So you're always using that floor area ratio in the activity center. It's just if you're doing commercial, that's all you're looking at.
does the county also use both measurements all the time? Do they have a preference?
It can vary. In the activity
varies.
center, it's the all-inclusive FAR, which encompasses all the air-conditioned space of commercial and either residential or temporary lodging density. For other land use categories, it's usually proportional, where they allocate the density to a certain part of the lot area, and then they allocate the commercial floor area to the other.
So the
But-
county primarily uses floor area ratio as their measurement. Am I hearing, is I hear? did I
Well,
hear
it
that right?
depends on what type of land use, and the county has different provisions. But in the activity centers, it's usually like an all-inclusive FAR that includes all the air-conditioned space of both uses. I mean, it makes it usually more restrictive to have to do that all-inclusive FAR, because that limits, honestly, how much density and the size of the hotel rooms. Because if you think about it, like down there, like they're going to have the ground floor retail, so that's going to take away like
A portion of your floor area ratio right there.
Yeah, right. And then if they do the alternative temporary lodging use standards, they have to count their parking garage, and that'll take even more air, like.
The floor area ratio. And then you're left with your units that you can,
Yeah.
that you can
So floor
use.
area ratio tends to be more restrictive?
No, so if you're doing like a condo or a hotel, you have both standards
You
that
have
you
both,
have
okay.
to. So it's a little, I wouldn't say more restrictive, but it controls better of what's built down there, because you have these two standards that you're looking at. And then what Andrew was saying, if someone is asking for those alternative temporary lodging use standards, or you have to have a development agreement, you also have to include the garage.
Right. Okay, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, of
Explaining that.
course.
Thank you.
Did a great job on the page 87, the existing FAR and the existing density on page 89. I was just kind of thumbing through here. I should have done it before the meeting, but as it is, and comparing the existing to the proposed versus what was existing in the code to the proposed. And I think that's where people might, raise their hand and say, this is a little extreme. And so I'm going to put together a little spreadsheet and send it to you and see if I'm reading this right. But, with the temporary lodging, which is the most extreme for density versus, and I'll just throw one out. Okay, existing FAR in the commercial core, I'm seeing it at 0.55. Is that correct, existing?
It's important to remember, though, that many of the existing buildings exceed that, and let me just, Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
Well,
so,
then it's not existing.
You're talking about the old standards? Is that what
No,
you're-
not the standards, unless I'm reading this wrong. Existing density, residential density on 89, and then, flip the page forward, to page 87, existing FAR. So if the existing FAR is, the most extreme is 1.2, and that's in the Johns Pass Resort area, but everything else that is existing FAR is a 0.55, and then we're jumping.
so on Fort Pinellas' map, so I included all the materials Fort Pinellas had in the countywide, like, map amendment meeting that they did last week. This map here shows the existing residential densities that are on, looks like
So-
on
so
there,
the-
the countywide rules, because it's mentioning the 30, because we don't even allow 30, on their map, they allow 30 units per acre. We don't for the residential. I would, like, so, because the county was looking at their stuff at their meeting. So a lot of the maps, we're looking at the densities they had on their maps, and as shown, what we're proposing is more restrictive than
Right.
the county's maximum.
Maybe it's my understanding of the definition existing. Are we talking about, because at a previous meeting, someone asked, I don't remember who exactly, what is physically there now?
And this is on this map right here in the slides we printed out for you and on the TV. And on the existing densities, as you can see, most of the higher density stuff's on the beach side, like some of these condos that were built in the 70s and 80s and stuff like Barefoot Beach Club in Madeira Bay that were built.
So page, I'm flipping back to the,
It's not in the agenda packet. It's
not in the agenda package. I'm
Yeah.
reading that wrong. Okay.
Yeah. And
Existing has to do with code, not
Yeah.
with what is actually
That
there.
has to do with the county's
Okay.
plan.
So if we
The
flip to the
county's
package that you just handed
standards.
out, I'm just trying to understand.
There's a lot of numbers, so.
Yeah,
I
it gets
understand.
confusing.
It's, and maybe it would be helpful, can we have this emailed to us? So
Yes,
that we can
of course.
And
zoom
and
in,
we'll
because
post
we
it on
can't
the
really read
website after the
a
meeting
lot
too.
of we can't really read a lot of the pieces here. So you did go through and do the map, and I applaud you for that, of what is actually built. Not what's in the code, not what was approved, not what could be built, but what is actually there. So that is the map that you referenced, that you have on the screen right now. Where is that in my package here? What page is that?
It should be slide 9.
Page 5 of the handout.
Oh, okay, yeah, there it is. Couldn't find it. So that is, and that shows the FAR, okay, so we have see, makes a lot more sense, because in the Johns Pass Resort area, it appears you have a FAR of 1.5 to 1.75, so we're saying 1.75, and what's proposed is 2.0. That's very close. That's not going to raise a lot of problems. As far as the UPA, the density, that same area, even with my glasses on, I can't read this, but it looks like it's the most extreme. Maybe you can read it for me. You have young eyes. What does that say?
So most of the existing density is on either on the beach side or up near Madeira Bay, and it's about 50 to 70 units per acre. So, I mean, the 75, if that was the direction you wanted to go with capping it max of 75, that would encompass everything within that.
So what I'm seeing here, and I'm just using this Johns Pass Resort area, that I'm reading that as 60 to 70, and we're proposing 75. I believe.
It should be with the, let me just go back to the John's Pass Resort. Just wanted to go to that one. So we're proposing 60 by right for temporary lodging, and depending on lot area size, 75 to 100. You guys are more than welcome to motion to cap it at 75, because that would encompass everything.
Right. I think that's really where everyone's just trying to get their mind around. What is being proposed and how will this impact future generations of development?
So the 75 that's the alternative temporary lodging use standards. So that's when someone would have to apply
Right.
for that development agreement, go through that whole process. 60 units per acre is just by right, so you wouldn't have to go through that whole process. And the 75 to 100, that's dependent on your lot size.
Right.
So anything greater, equal to or greater than an acre, then you get 100. Less than that, it's 75.
Right. I mean, it's
That's
so
how
much
it is.
information, and, we've got, on that same page, Johns Pass Village Activity Center, it's all blue. Everything's blue. What's that mean? That
It
means
it means it's higher density.
higher density, but then it really, you have a by right to go with higher density in this activity center, and then it breaks down into the different
Well,
subcategories.
You can't exceed the density. I mean, if you have something that's right up against that, let's say, whatever the max density, they're not, especially with these non-conforming condo buildings, they can't add any more, like, to a non-conforming building.
Right.
It's not
But
FEMA
at the end of the
compliant,
day, the
so-
residents want to be able to say, all right, if they tear that building down, they can put something similar back or not, or it's going to be much more, or if they tear, they tear down a smaller structure here, what can they build? It's going to be similar or it's not, by right. So I applaud you for putting these together. Now we just have to incorporate them, or I do, into some sort of chart to understand it. So what was,
Yeah.
what's
Always
proposed and what's there
Feel free to
now?
ask us questions, send residents our way. We're more than happy
Yeah.
to answer any questions.
Okay.
We understand this whole activity center can be very confusing. There's a
Sure,
lot of
I'm-
numbers going out there because you're looking at
We've all been
what's on
living
the
it.
ground, existing standards, old standards, proposed standards, what's floor area ratio, what's density.
What the
So
county says, what the
it's a
city
lot.
says, what it used to be. No, I get it.
On a positive note, compared to, because I was keeping up with some of the news that was going on in St. Pete Beach, and on a positive note, something like that, it's not possible to be built there the way we've written it, the way the land is set up, the way the requirements we're putting in place. Because when you look at down there, they have these big lots, like they have, I think, about 9 acres of buildable land that's just a rectangle, no public streets, nothing coming through, cutting through it. And they allow for much higher heights than what we allow. And it's just not physically possible to build any. The largest thing that could potentially be built there would be about 1/6 the size of what was approved in St. Pete Beach. 1/6 the size, probably about half the height. So that's what I mean. We've written this in a way to make sure we don't get large resort projects like
No,
that.
I understand that, but if it put a planned development throws it all out, except for the extremes, and which, like I said, I think
mean, the
that's
special
great.
area plan still, and the land use stuff still regulates the PD. So, I mean, the PD can't violate the future land use or the special area plan. So, I mean, whatever, they still got to come in and meet those requirements. If they do a development agreement, they still got to prove there's enough sewage capacity, that they've mitigated traffic impacts. So, I mean.
It's a long, drawn process, I understand.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to point out, because I know there's been some confusion on the alternative temporary lodging use standards, all those numbers with the asterisks.
Right.
That's just for a development agreement, so you don't have to rezone to a PD. So say if somebody wants to go through those standards, They would still have to adhere to all the setbacks, the height, everything that's in the zoning. So it's not changing your zoning. Now, when you apply for a PD, you also have to do the development agreement. So that's why there can be some confusion. You're saying, oh, the development agreement, a lot of people connect that with the PD, but that alternative temporary lodging use standards, not with the PD, it's just the development agreement.
Great, thank you. Hope I can send this out so I can
Yes, and
can
let
zoom
us
it
know
out.
if you have any questions. We are here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions, please?
So I would like to clarify, we talked about this in our meeting, a couple of things. One, the county would have allowed by right 100 units per acre.
Yes.
Okay. Number two that I had on my notes is because a lot of the questions that are in the community that I've heard is based on people believing that someone is going to build a huge hotel down in Johns Pass. And I know that from what you've given us and taught us over the course of the months that we've been working on this, years actually going back to the Planning Commission, is that what the primary goal here is to bring into compliance the buildings that are existing. So where some things are increasing, they're increasing so that those buildings would be able to be rebuilt. But what I think would be helpful if you could give us a quick idea of if someone purchased an acre of land down in Johns Pass and they were going to tear everything down off of that acre of land, what would the building, the hotel that they would build, what would that look like, taking into consideration units per acre, and they have to meet the FAR, and parking is included in the FAR, which was not in the past, correct?
That's only if you're doing the
Right,
alternative.
and that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if
Yes,
somebody
any
was going to
structured
do
parking
a
has to
development
be-
agreement, if we could tell the community what that building sitting on 1 acre, that we'll say hotel, so that people could have a visual of what would be built there, and they're not thinking that, oh, they're going to build a 15-story building and there's going to be 3,000 rooms. I think that visual would be helpful.
I think it's important to remember, and I showed, because of Fisherman's Alley cutting through a lot of those parcels, it really limits the size and scale of what you can build. And then also with the ground floor commercial requirement, that also
That takes up a lot of the floor area ratio, as well as the parking, which, okay, so if you have 1 acre of land that's going, and you go the alternative temporary lodging use, you get that, so you're going to have 100 units, but you're also going to be capped at, let's go to the, oh, I just missed it, okay. You'll also be capped at that 3 FAR. So you're going to have, imagine just over the entire land, 3 stories of just straight building. Obviously, we'll have setbacks. So if you reduce that, they'll probably add 1 more floor, 1 more or maybe 1.5 floors. So you're looking at 4 floors, maybe a 5th floor, over half. But we can see if we can put together some sort of visual just to bring that back, or email that out, because I know that the next time we'll meet will be whenever you will be voting on this, so.
And the county's already voted on this, so as far as the county is concerned, this is what it is.
Yes.
So if we do not adopt this, then we're out of compliance with the county.
Yes, and we would have to go back to the county, and I imagine we would have to ask for, not rezoning it, but changing the land use back to what it was. And we have not talked to the county about that, but they have changed it on their level.
And this change to the neighborhood center, I mean, we had gone in, they advised us to reduce, we've reduced, so we've really followed the guidelines of the county.
Yes, definitely.
Thank
Yes,
you.
so now it's neighborhood center, so similar to Paso Grill, Palm Harbor, downtown district. And then I think there's one in
like a-
Tarpon Springs.
Yeah, and there's a kind of
it's a
mixed-use
sponge
apartment
docks.
complex. That looks like a low-rise apartment complex in Dunedin. So these are kind of smaller, either historic things or smaller mixed-use
Yeah,
developments.
more of like your Main Street feel, which is what we have down there. Yeah.
And it's important to remember that this category is more restrictive than what Town Center has. It's basically more restrictive than any other of the beach activity centers. So, you can't do those large, single-building resorts. Like, even 100 rooms down there would probably be split between two buildings because there's streets cutting through a lot of them, and the lots are very narrow. So, you can't really, you end up having to have built, because that's what John's Pass, it has all these nice little small streets like Fisherman's Alley, Gulf Lane, Pelican Lane, like all these nice little streets. And that's the way we want to keep it. So, and that's the way we've written it.
I think another thing that I would like to remind us that I'm particularly fond of and have heard from residents is that this also gives us a lot more control over the exterior look of the building, where we did not have that control on the town center. I think showing, if you could show us a visual of the build, of what someone could do,
It'll be
possibly.
pretty,
Pretty generic is
yeah,
okay. But
boxy,
just
but
giving
yeah,
people
we
an
can-
idea of height, because I think even though when we go to doing the next step, which is zoning, is where we're really going to address the height of buildings, I think that
Yes.
setting the public's mind at ease that there's not going to be a 15-story, 1,500-room hotel down
Absolutely
in
not.
Johns Pass would be very beneficial.
of course, yeah, I'll email that to Robin and he can send that out.
Anything else? Have anything? Any public comment on this? Okay. Thank you for doing what I asked about breaking it down.
Of course, I
see
think that was
in
really
there.
helpful.
Great
so
job,
thank you.
great job.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, next up, Chief. Says something about the fire department here. It's got to be all good.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commission. What we have in front of you is the current statewide mutual aid agreement, which is put out through the State Emergency Response Plan. And the last one was signed in 2018. They made a few changes, nothing that would drastically affect any mutual aid that we provide or that we receive. And essentially what this is allows us to either provide mutual aid like we did for Hurricane Ian, or receive mutual aid in case we were to be impacted like Fort Myers was. And then it also allows us to have the opportunity to request funds from FEMA for reimbursement. So that's what is presented in front of you. And every municipality is bringing this to their commission right now because they're requesting it by March. But yeah, that's essentially what it is.
It's just an update. There's no revisions.
Nope. Yeah, it's just, they do it every few years. The last time they did it was 2018.
Commissioners, any questions? Any public comment? Okay. All right, Chief, next.
All right, just to provide a update on where we are with Reddington Municipal Building. Again, everybody knows the county allowed Madeira Beach to take that project over, allow me to be the project manager for it. We should have a clean agreement from the county soon that will be presented to you all as well for agreement. And what it is they had to change a few things, but usually their agreements are the city will front the money and then we'll request reimbursement from the county, but they're going to change it so it doesn't have any impact on us fiscally at all. So with that, yeah, exactly. It's going to be great. So at this point, all I do is request for a draw, whether it be for plan review, concrete, whatever it may be.
Like a construction loan.
Exactly. And Right now, Wilder Architects, they're completing the second half of the plans. We're being cautiously optimistic, hoping to break ground over there July-ish. That's what we're hoping, because half the plans were already done, and then it kind of started to fall apart, and Wilder wouldn't complete them unless they were obviously going to be paid. So this is where Madeira Beach stepped in and said, we can, it's not a dead project. Let us see what we can do. So that's where we're at with that. And a quick update for our medic unit. It was a struggle to get all the lights and the sirens and equipment, the extendable pull-out bed. We've received all of that. It's all installed. It's at Motorola right now getting the Sierra wireless modem. And we're hoping that it'll be in service by Wednesday of next week, just in time for spring break. So it's
Well
gonna work
played.
out. Absolutely.
Thank you for the
Any
update,
questions for me?
Chief. Yeah, any questions, commissioners?
Perfect.
Any public comment? All right. Next up, well, we got Public Works Department. We have anything there?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay,
that
that's
shouldn't
okay.
be there.
Recreation Department, Jay?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Bring in front of you the purchase for an ADA bus for our programming. Long and short of it, we have an existing, we have an existing bus that we're looking to replace. It is a shorter bus that does not have ADA accessibility to it. We've looked at the Florida Sheriff's Association contract and have obtained a purchase contract within our budget, well, just outside of our budget, but with the trade-in of the old bus would put us underneath our budget, and we'd be able to replace that and get us a larger bus that has ADA capabilities that would serve our social club programming as well as our after-school programming, and it would also help in the instance that we utilize these buses for special events, travel from off-site parking lots and everything else. So long and short of it, it's kind of a long time coming thing that we probably should have done in the past. Haven't had the need for it, but we're starting to see the need for it now, and definitely don't want to be put in a situation where we do need it and don't have it. So this is a bus that is sitting on the lot ready for purchase and would put us in a good situation with the programming. So.
Are we currently in violation of some federal ordinance since we're not ADA compliant with the bus?
We've made alternative transportation necessary in the case
Okay.
that we've run into that issue.
But this puts it all in one place.
This would put us all in one place. Staff, myself, Max, as well as a third bus driver, all have the license to drive this bus, and will be trained on operation of the ADA features of it as well. So,
Good, thanks.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
I just go back to, are we looking at grants? Have we looked at e-civics or whatever it's called, or other grant opportunities to help offset some of this cost?
I'm not sure that we have with this. I can look further into it.
Whether it's in the budget or not.
Right. I understand.
If we can look into that, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any public comment on this? Okay, thank you. You have something? Anybody else?
I do,
Oh, I'm
Mayor.
sorry.
Oh, please.
Yeah, if I could just, not on this particular issue, but before we wrap up the meeting, I just wanted to bring to your attention that the Second District Court of Appeal has issued its mandate on the case that Mr. Gay filed against the city, as well as former Mayor Hendricks, Commissioners Andrews, Price, and Hodges. The mandate basically ends that lawsuit that was filed by Mr. Gay against the city and those individuals as a direct result of there being no request for rehearing and no request for a written opinion. So that case is final now, and I just want to let you know that that case was based upon an argument that the city and those four commissioners violated the Sunshine Law. The court found that they did not.
Great.
Could I ask a question? Robin, could we get an idea of what that cost the city in
Sure.
attorney fees to defend against that?
Yes.
Not today, but at a future meeting, please.
Anybody else have anything? Time is 7:19 PM and we will adjourn.